Right, time to look at functionalism and youth culture. Functionalism, when we look at youth culture, we go back to Durkheim originally and some of his ideas about the structure of society, and we try and apply this to youth culture specifically. So for Durkheim, we would say youth culture is one big homogenous group when he explores it. Okay, so everybody is the same, sharing the same norms, the same values, and above all the same experiences, which is a bit of a potential problem here, which is we can get a lot of weaknesses from functionalist view of youth culture based off of that. But for Durkheim, when we look at youth culture, he would suggest that youth culture is a form of social integration. So this is like the process which brings newcomers, brings people together, gives them a sense of belonging. So social integration is essential, according to Durkheim, when we are in this stage where we are going from child to adult. Okay, this kind of weird bit that young people are in that we now call youth culture. So if you don't have this social integration, if you are not part of youth culture as a whole, you run the risk of falling into anomie. Now, we talked about anomie, I'm sure, a lot before in crime, but obviously we know that anomie is this normalist state of disconnect with the rest of society, and it leads to unpleasant situations, it leads to unpleasant thoughts, it leads to isolation, it leads to depression, it potentially leads to criminality, even to suicide, which is obviously Durkheim's most famous book. So for him, we can narrow it down and we can make youth culture important for integration as you're moving from child to adult. And I suppose you could see, it's very easy to look at people throughout history, school shooters and things in America, where you see people who are isolated during that period, and you see the potentially negative effects of anomie around them. Now, for Parsons says his idea is that youth culture is a rite of passage. We know that everything that our functionalist is going to say, he gives a purpose to youth culture. The organic analogy would suggest that all the institutions of society function like part of the body. Youth culture will act as a positive function. Now, for Parsons, he says this is a rite of passage. Now, a rite of passage traditionally is like an initiation ceremony. You might see this in Jewish culture through bar mitzvah, or you might see this in kind of a South American culture of a quinceañera. Now, for Parsons, remember, these, let's use bar mitzvah as an example. That's not a traditionally Western event, right? A bar mitzvah is a quick, you're going in, one day you're a boy, you go through your ceremony and you come out a man. It's a very, very quick event. Now, Parsons says as Western society doesn't really have these quick events. We have to create a rite of passage of our own, and youth culture becomes this. So it is a longer, drawn out period where you take on smaller types of responsibility, like a part-time job. You work 15 hours a week rather than 40 hours a week. You detach from your parents. Okay? You start to live a life that's outside of the home and shape your identity outside of the home. So for Parsons, again, this idea of youth culture has a function, and it's a straightforward one. It is one that makes you, or gives you the tools to move gradually from child to adult in this period, okay? Because we don't have those quick ceremonies. We have to come up with our own, and that's what youth culture is for Parsons. Now, for Eisenhower, you're seeing the same as Durkheim, the same for Parsons, you're still seeing movement, okay? And he would agree that youth culture is a period of turbulence and anxiety and stress. But this movement is coming from an ascribed status to an achieved status. So what he would say is generally you get your ascribed status, a given status that you receive primarily at home. You might be the baby of the family, for example, could be an ascribed status. And then you move from that to your achieved status. Now, your achieved status is one that you earn. Now, primarily the most important agent of socialization for Eisenhower during this is your peer group. So you will move from your given status at home, baby of the family, to a status within your peer group, whilst you are going from child to adult. And essentially that's That's what happens, isn't it? You get given a status at home and you then earn one out in the wider world. Now, for Eisenhower, social solidarity with your peer group, this like glue, this community, is very, very important. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to blow off the steam, the anxiety, the turbulence that comes with being at an age where you're not a child, but not really still an adult. And in that sense, what are the things that you do with your friends, where you go and you smash the windows of a derelict block, or you go and do a bit of graffiti, or you cause a little bit of trouble. And what he would say is this is a good example of the safety valve concept, this idea that releasing small bits of tension, small bits of deviant behaviour may prevent bigger deviance kind of manifesting itself in your behaviour and in your thought pattern. So you let loose a little bit with your friends, with your peer group, who you've got social solidarity with, in a community with, and you are shaping your identity because you're moving now to your achieved status, and you're perhaps doing some deviant behaviours which will protect you from further deviant behaviours, or more negative maybe thoughts, such as being in anime itself. Now, these are the three main, I would have said, functionalist ideas when we look at youth culture. Note that all of these relate to transition, okay? They all have movement in them. The idea that you need integration as you're going from child to adulthood to prevent anime. The idea that it's a rite of passage, a smooth, longer, drawn-out process as you go from child to adult. The movement from an ascribed status when you're young to an achieved status when you're older. All of these have got movement, have got purpose for youth culture. And then you've got a couple of other extra writers that you potentially could use, but may not be as applicable to a question about transition or bridge or change or movement. You've got Abrams. Now, Abrams would say youth is functional for the economy, so he's still giving it a function. There's still a benefit to youth culture, but this one is an economic benefit. It's a benefit that young people are now primary kind of consumers and are looked at in that sense, thought of in that way. And this allows you to be the focus of a lot of, the adverts, and also having more disposable income, having more ability and to go out and purchase things, means that you are providing a service for the economy. You're buying more things, that means more tax. You're buying more things, that means more jobs, more shops can open. And that is because you're a primary consumer now as a young person. So it's providing jobs, it's providing money. Youth culture has a purpose. It's not necessarily one of transition for Abrams. It is an economic benefit to it. You can make those choices on what you want to pick to buy. And then, of course, final one, and perhaps this will come up and be more appropriate when we are looking at youth culture and deviancy, is Albert Cohen. Remember, not Stan Cohen, it's Albert Cohen and his idea of status frustration, where he's looking at working class lads in education having their status kind of rocked and shaken by an underperformance in school. These young lads wanted to do well in school at the beginning, but they're starting to find themselves underachieving compared to the middle class lads who may be more adequately prepared before they attend a school institution, which is largely a middle class institution, to benefit from this, from schooling, and to thrive in those conditions. When these working class lads start to feel their status inhibited, restricted and dropping, they undergo this feeling of status frustration. They want to do well, but they can't. So consequently, I'm now a low status individual. I need to raise my status. How am I going to do that? Well, by delinquent acts with my peer group, and my peer group will also be young working class lads who are performing badly at school, the same as I am. So lots of functionalist writers, but you can see that there are some differences there. Cohen's would work well about delinquency and deviance. Abrams, if you get a question on consumerism or globalization, then you would use him. For ones about transition and comparing directly to the other theories, then I will be using these guys at the start, who have a much more positive consensus, rose-tinted view of youth culture, rather than some of the other views from, let's say, our Marxists, or potentially some of our feminists that would say youth culture's formed primarily as a form of resistance.